All right, we're live. Yep. All right. Yep. Yeah, we're live. Welcome, everybody. This is the Space Water Podcast, episode 80. Of course, my name is Castaldo. You can find me at the Mystical Spiral store. We have 30% off coupon code available this weekend, self-sponsored by my store, the Mystical Spiral store. So you guys can check me out there. We have another special presentation with you guys with our exclusive guest right here on the Space Water Podcast. For over a decade, Gary has been coming on my show. We're the dynamic duo over the years. And no, it's not Bruce Wayne, it's Gary Wayne. Everybody from Genesis6conspiracy.com. You guys can find two books in the Genesis 6 Conspiracy series. Gary has been coming on, like I said, for a long time on my show, and it's really a blessing and an honor to be able to share the airways with him and have him on our podcast, radio shows, all the different platforms I've had over the years. Gary has been coming on them all, and it's really, like I said, it's an honor for me to be able to learn and help discover the truth, hopefully, on a lot of these ancient mysteries that have to do with the Bible and various other religions and how it pertains to what's transpiring on the planet today and how we've been put in the dark by these bloodlines and these long running war over knowledge and how we've been suppressed with this knowledge and very few people are bringing it to the surface, and Gary is one of these people. So, guys, welcome back, Gary Wayne, on the show tonight. Today's going to be a great show. We're talking about the sky gods of the Ugarit. Gary, thank you for coming back on. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Well, happy to be back with you again and looking forward to the show. It's one of my favorite topics, the Ugaritic texts and things that are in it, which are not often talked about, which is rather kind of interesting because they're so informative and they're transnational. They link in so many different um, accountings from other cultures and countries that it's almost like it becomes a bit of a Rosetta Stone to understanding the ancient world. So, yeah, so thank you for inviting me back and looking forward to the show today. And hopefully we'll, if we do our job, we'll raise a few eyebrows and have a little bit of head scratching going on.
Yeah, that's all we can hope for, right? Gary, it's always a pleasure to have you on. And I know this one of my favorite topics as well. We've corresponded over the years about the Ugarit. I figured we'd do our own show about it. Maybe
Yeah,
before we even get into like the pantheons and various peoples that are
yeah,
associated with the region. Let's
yeah,
first describe what the Ugarit is, because I think some people may think it's actually a tribe. They don't
yeah,
realize it's a region that had various tribes connected to it,
yeah,
and
yeah,
as a kingdom, right? It on a bigger whole, it was part of the Levant.
yeah. It was. It had a capital city, uh, Ugarit, where the name comes from, and it was not uncommon to have a capital city. Typically, you would have two cities that were very important. One would be the city where the king lived, and the other one would be the religious city. So, if you look at Mount Hermon, for example, which is Mount Saphon in the Ugarit text, uh, they basically have two cities as it relates to Mount Hermon that are the royal cities over there, which are Ashtaroth and Edrei, which King Og ruled over in the time of the Exodus. But Ugarit isn't at Mount Hermon. It's between Mount Hermon and Tyr in the north.
So Mount
And
Saphon is like their version of Mount Hermon.
it is, yeah. And once you understand that those kinds of connections, things start to make some sense. So biblically, we get the name Mount Hermon, but that wasn't its original name. Mount Hermon is it's a Hebrew word, Hermonim, and plural at that, because probably for the three peaks of Mount Hermon, but it derives from a Hebrew word called Haram, Charam or Cherem, and a couple of variations thereof. It all means curse and accursed. So, like as in the accursed oath of Heramathena that was taken by the 200 Watchers at Mount Hermon, where the Council of Gods was located. In this case, with the Ugaritic text, the Baalim Council as we know it, um, after the flood, but before the flood, it was the Elim Council because it was the parent god that ruled. El is the father of Baal. And so other names, so it was changed from some name to Mount Hermon because that's where the oath of the fallen angels were. And also why you have so many connections of giants to Mount Hermon as well. And King Og reigned, from, as I said, as a Rephaim. So when we look at other names that we do know of, biblically we're told their names are by different peoples. Sinir, Sion, Sion, not to be confused with Zion, different Hebrew word. And so I said Shinir, Sion, and um, I can't quite think of the other name that's in there right now, but another S word um, that gives sort of a transliteration understanding that its original name started with S, and whatever the variant was,
Is it Shinar or something?
Shinar, not
Oh, you said that
Shinar.
one already.
Yeah, I said Shinir.
Oh, that's
Sinir.
that's the one you were talking about. Okay.
Yeah, Sirion. Sirion
Sirion.
is yeah is the other one. And so we know it was probably started with S, but it took on its mythos for a name. So it's important to look at that as a mountain that would be understood as in the Sumerian history and religion as Nippur, where the cedar forest is located. That's Mount Hermon, the cedar forest, the cedars of Lebanon. And that's where King Hababa of the cedar forest reigned from and was a terrible one after the flood that Gilgamesh and Enkidu went there to kill. And these are likely the Elam or the ancient Olamim giants after the flood that they went there as you connect that back. So you might also look at this because of the word hierarchy in Greek means sacred assembly of archons. This is the council of the gods. So Mount Hermon could be the same as Mount Hermon, or there's several mountains, and maybe Hermon is the seventh or the eighth, uh, if you want to have an additional one or one of the seven. But you have these holy mountains where these council of gods are ruling from all around the world. But more cultures than not point to Mount Hermon as being the location of this assembly of the gods. So El rules over the assembly of the gods before the flood. Baal rules as the chief god after the flood. And then if we understand that El would be cognate to Anu, El would be cognate in the same as Kronos in Greece and other gods after the flood. And Baal, when he takes over, he's equivalent to Anki or Enlil or both. Pick your one on that one. Osiris, Zeus, Indra, all of these other ones that are offspring gods who take over after killing the parent gods in polytheism after the flood. So again, what we get is something that is very unique where now we can look at the separation of the reign of the gods before the flood and the reign of the gods after the flood and understand that in terms of we're trying as to when we're looking at the history. Now you have to be a little bit careful because the offspring gods were alive before the flood as well. But when they're referred to as the chief gods and a part of that assembly of gods as offspring gods, that's after the flood. And that's how you start to get your timeline.
Very interesting. So, do you think it's possible that Mount Saffon could have had like an incursion on it as well? Just not it's not talked about and like we don't have record of it.
No, not as you stated it, but if they're the same, which they seem to be the same name for the same mountain as Mount Hermon, then it's referring to the same incursion.
No,
And
but
what
I'm
we
saying like in they have the that Mount Saffon is in the Ugarit is a different is
No,
a their own,
no,
right? Like this
no,
the
no.
Mountain of
There,
Baal.
Mountain of Baal is Mount Hermon, or
Well,
Mountain of
that is Mount Saffon.
yes.
Okay, I always thought I would thought the Ugarit version of Mount Hermon is Mount Saffon, but they were two distinct locations.
Well, I mean, you have various capital cities of the various nations. So you have different nations that are around Mount Hermon than are in. So that's the separation, but they all worship the same pantheon of God, just as the people of Tyr have a few different vernacular names to the Baalim councils and the gods in there, but it's the same pantheon, it's the same gods, and some of the names are exactly the same. So I think it's part of that original Raphaim hierarchy of or hegemony and world order after the flood within that, at least within the Middle East area, that associates Mount Hermon as the center mountain.
I'm trying to think of the name of the Mount Saffon that I was thinking of there. It's like the one that's associated with lightning and ball.
Yeah, well, that's Mount
That's
Hermon
Mount
too.
Hermon because
Yeah,
there was another name for it. I can't think of
yeah.
it now. Hold on. What is it called today?
Mount Saffon,
Yeah.
Mount Hermon.
Wait, hold on. I gotta look this up, Gary, because I
Okay,
know
go ahead. Yep.
J Jebel Akra.
Yeah, but that's not the mountain, right? That's not where he rules from. But
Okay, you
there's
know where I'm
many
talking
mount
about though, right?
yeah, there's many mountains throughout Israel and Saudi Arabia today and other locations that are holy mountains, so to speak, but not where the council was located. And of course, the council is located where Baal would go back and forth between his portal, his main portal, which is the, gateway uh, to Hades at the bottom of Mount Hermon. And he would go through that gate, that portal every day from the underworld to the physical world to oversee his both of his empires.
And they use various, they have various ancient Hebrew Canaanite comparisons, but they don't use technically the Asherah, right? They use Anath and the mother is
Yeah, so Ashtaroth or Atharat,
yeah,
uh,
Atherat. That was the one I was
Atharat,
looking for.
yeah.
Yeah, Atherat.
Again, it's just sort of an Atharat may be more tier than the Ugarit, but Ashtaroth, Atharat are the same. Those are parent mother goddesses that are associated with El. And that, after the flood, is Baal's consort. They're all queens of heaven, all the same title because they inherit the mythos. But just again, once you start to get the time frame right, then it starts to make sense. Now, you're going to have the same worship that's being passed on. You're going to have like the Asherah poles, which is another form of Ashtaroth or Astarte, and it goes back to the mother goddess of the antediluvian epoch. But it's again, you have to associate that those gods and goddesses are gone, even though some of that mythos rolls forward that would be under Anat. And then in some versions, they have, you know, you actually get the understanding that somehow Ashtaroth and or a mother goddess and another god actually is showing up as a consort to the chief god. But it seems unlikely because once you accept that queen goddess aspect of it, you are violating the sins that are not forgiven. So it's part of violating the laws of creation. This is counterfeiting the Holy Spirit and polytheism. So all of those original parent gods that did those types of crimes would have been swept up and sent to the pit prison before the flood. So that's why you have a replacement with Baal and Anat.
Yeah, and Anat is sort of like the the consort of
Yeah.
Baal, like the
Yeah.
sister and consort. She seems to even rescue him in some
Yes.
stories.
Yeah. 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 So one of the things that does make it confusing and why you have to understand what a parent god is and an offspring god is that the offspring gods inherit the mythos of the position. So all of the history that goes with it, all of the story and all of the narratives associated would follow them as that replacement god. So that's but once again, if you can just sort of stay disciplined to the understanding that um, they reigned at different times, even though they were all
Yeah.
together at one time, then it starts to make some sense.
And then some of them sort of were like later on, I guess like the Phoenicians and all of them, they were built off of some of this knowledge, right?
Yeah, well, it was. And so, in with Phoenicia, I mean, and that's got an association with Cadmus,
Yeah.
and the founding. And Cadmus is likely the same god as Kadesh, QDM in the Old Semitic, um, that was also part of that Baalim Council and also after the flood. And so you get a little more presence of Cadmus or Kadesh there, just as you do in Egypt and in Greece, and less influence moving to the east within that historical context and writing. And Kadesh actually has some holy cities named in the covenant land after him. Um, and he also produced giants, the Ben Kadim, which is Ben as in son in Hebrew or Semitic, because one of the reasons why I like to use the Ugaritic text is it has uses the original vowelless Semitic, which is almost identical in many ways with the original Hebrew, which is Semitic. And you actually get the same words in the same vowelless and same almost evolutionary um, addition with vowels and other letters, like with the H in there, and a lot like within instead of RPM for rapium, it's Raphaim with an H in there for the giants that were created by the Baalim Council. So there are at least two cities called Kadesh within the covenant land in the north that worshipped
Yeah.
as part of that Baalim Council. So you see the interactions and connections of it. But the Ben Kadim are the Cadmonites that are listed in Genesis 15, which is
Oh wow.
part of the land that was awarded to um, Abraham. And also in there are the uh, Kenites and the Kenizzites, along with the Rephaim as part of the land, which is the Rephaim. So if you take a Hebrew Cadmonite back to its Hebrew word, it's Cadmoni with a Q, just as
Interesting.
Kadesh is with a Q. You take the vowels out now, you get QDM. So
Whoa.
so Ben is also a Hebrew word for son. So sons of
Yeah.
Kadesh. Now you
Wow.
get the parent god, um, and with different translations, as in Kadesh or Kadmon or Kad Kadesh, that are going to probably produce a giant of a similar name that would be eponymous for the tribe that is being created, and we get that as the kings or king. They actually get for the son the Ben Kadim, you have Ug Kadim with the king of the Kadim. Just as Ug is the same word for Og. So we don't really know what King Og's real name is. It means king as you take that back in its
Yeah.
etymology.
I was gonna say earlier that that's probably where Og was comes right
Yeah.
from Ugarit, the Ugarit, or right?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Yeah, and Og is OWG as it's transliterated out of the Hebrew, but rooted in UWG. And of course, the W is kind of silent, right? So it's a king title, like Pharaoh. or like Caesar.
Yeah.
Um, and
A
so
SAR.
again, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Hey,
So
Gary,
it's
there's an interesting connection. I'm not sure if you can go there because they do switch the letters around, and I'm not
mhm,
sure if like, but I'm very familiar with the Rig Veda. I've been going through it for
yep,
years, as you know.
yep,
And there's in Sanskrit in the Rig Veda, there you know
yep,
how they do like Rudra becomes Shiva
yep,
and all that. Well,
yep,
they have various names for Indra, and one of the over 100 times they use this when they want to describe Indra as being a terrible one or like an evil one or something like that. They describe him as either Ugra or Gora. One the name is Ugra, Ugra,
yep,
and Gora. Those two when describing Indra, they it's like the fierce one or the terrible one. And
yeah,
I found that interesting because they would be like the terrible ones,
yeah,
right? Like the Rephaim. I mean, they're part of the Ugarit. There'd be some Rephaim people that were
yeah.
part of the Ugarit. The Hurrians, Hittites. I mean, all these guys.
So Ugar is in there,
Yeah,
right?
it's just switched around,
It
right? It's
is, and
Ugra. Yeah,
yeah, and so and now when you're compounding words, sometimes letters get dropped, particularly within the language and within other languages, they adopt that in. So if you look at the compounded word of ug and arit, arit is the Hebrew word for terrible, Semitic word for terrible.
wow.
So now you have
I just gotta chill.
the terrible king. And in Ezekiel 32, these are the Eratim, mighty ones, that terrible ones that are in the pit prison for the terrible things they did on earth. So, yes, that's how you start to make those kind of connections between Sanskrit and Indo-Aryan or Indo-European, original Semitic, and you can follow that and create significant relationships that sort of open up that common history if you follow it. So when you have King Hababa, an Olamim of Sumeria, Elam, as we would know that transliterated, and part of the ancient ones, meaning ancient, that Nimrod is going to intermarry with, you have another sort of association with these ancient ones from the east that the Kenazim and the Kenim and the Cadmonim were understood as part of the ancient ones of the east. And Olamim would be one of those giant tribes of the east.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So, and I have to go back to this for a moment. And there's some questions we had too, like people talked about. Let's go back to it for a second because I have questions because I need clarity for myself too.
Sure.
Um, Going back to the same mountain as Herman and Saffron, there was a question by Lynn Earthling 7867. She wanted to know, so Olympus, Zeus, is this the same mountain? She asked, and
Yes.
then
Well,
also for
uh,
myself,
uh,
I have a question after that as well about it.
yeah, I would say yes, but what makes sense when you look at the seven Satans in the Book of Enoch, the seven wandering stars, is that you have a master council of the gods. Also, linking in the Book of Enoch, you have the chiefs of tens. Seven Satans times 10 is 70, which is the 70 nations that the Council of Gods rule over. And that those seven Satans underneath Satan from a biblical perspective um, would be ruling from seven holy mountains around the world, as the polytheist accounts layer in the seven holy mountains. So you have a central mountain, and then you have seven holy mountains. So the question gets to be, as I said earlier, is there seven mountains or are there eight? And it's hard to know whether or not which I've not been able to totally sort of decipher it. So to answer the question specifically is Zeus is the same god as Baal, but Baal ruled from Sappho. So that's probably going to be Zeus.
Yeah. Yeah. They even have like in Phoenician, they have one called like Baal Haman
Yeah.
or Haman, Hammon. I don't know if I'm
Baal
saying it.
Haman and Baal
Yeah.
Hermon and
Yeah.
there's a lot of Baal with something else attached to it.
Oh,
And but
Haman. That's Herman. I didn't even put that together before.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my God, Gary. Thank you. You just connected that for me. Yeah, they
Yeah.
even they show him on a throne a lot of times, even with the spiraling horns coming out, the ram horns.
Yeah, you can't get more obvious on the name change than Baal Hermon, and then understand that when you have a second incursion and the Rephaim are created, that's by the Baalim gods, not the Elim gods that were ruling before.
Yeah.
Um,
Can you explain to how important the bull worship is and like the Apis
yeah.
bull is to these? It's very, I think,
So
and the symbolism behind it, because I think a lot of it has to do with solar worship and
yeah.
you know.
So the antediluvian religion was a sun worshiping bull cult, to wrap it up in a nutshell. And somehow that crosses the flood. And we get that through either the gods reintroducing it or through Hermes on the two pillars of Lamech, or Zoroastrian, which is the polytheist religion both before and after the flood. And so when we look at what was the question again?
The importance of bull worship.
Bull worship, yes, I
Yeah.
got onto that little rabbit hole, sorry. And I'm going, oh, the heck am I talking about here?
Hey,
So bull worship.
I
So
can't
the
imagine how we even keep as much as we do in our heads.
it's hard to keep straight sometimes. So this is the same imagery that crosses the flood, right? With the Zoroastrianism, with the bull cult that shows up in Egypt as the Apis bull cult that you're talking about, and Osiris is Azar, who migrates after the flood with Hermes and Ham to Africa, right? So that's or takes power over there. However you want to get there, it's coming from the same source out of Sumeria shortly after the flood. So when we look at this bull culture, why is it so prominent? Yes, we can look to one head of a cherubim and say that's a bull. Some people say ox, more accurately bull, inconsistent in uh, multiple cultures around the world. But it's more than that, because if you look at the bull fertility goddess that creates Gilgamesh, she's called the bull. In the Ugaritic texts, all the Baalim council, whatever form of fallen angel order they are, is a bull. The, and so the offspring of the Baalim, whether it's the Ben Gurg, it's the Raphaim, it's the Tanu, whoever the GBR for Gibberim, where that comes from, that tribe, they're called bulls as well. Now, biblically, we sort of wrap our heads around this. So, okay, we got Rephaim, we get Mount Hermon, but we also get Bashan. Bashan is at Mount Hermon. That's the region that Mount Hermon is in. And we get the term bulls of Bashan. The bulls of Bashan are the ones that are mocking Jesus on the cross. So that's going to be fallen angels not in the pit prison and disembodied giant spirits that are doing the mocking of Jesus while he's on there. And then you have the fatlings of Bashan, the slaughter of the bulls of Bashan in the end time, or the descendants of them. So we need to understand that Nephilim, in its original understanding as a definition, was a giant, a tribe of giant tyrants or terrible ones, and bullies. And a bully is because they were called a bull as well. And what I loved about the Ugaritic text, it describes the
Interesting.
gods as bulls, and it describes the giants as bulls, and that both their councils were at Mount Hermon. Both the Council of the Gods and the Council of the Giants were at Mount Hermon as the assembly or the convocation or the grand assembly of Datanu. So, and Datanu is a specific tribe and a god, and also generic for the in the Ugaritic text in particular, but they also use those other terms of convocation and grand assembly, but also the assembly of Datanu, which is the assembly of the Ugs, the kings. This is Nippur, where the kings receive their authority from. This is the round table of gods and the round table of kings and knights, just as you have the round table in the Arthur legends carrying that whole imagery forward, and the Lord rings or the ring lords um, were of that same ring um, and wheel in that understanding as a wheel as part of their wheel cult. So you had a wheel cult of the giants, which was the Zoroastrianism, and then you have the bull and the sun worship. So the bull represents um, an aspect of the reign of the gods as generic for all of them, and specifically for perhaps a cherubim, and then a sun god, which is generally associated with a seraphim god. And you have that put together in two horns and a sun disk a lot of times. And what that's telling you is most of the high level ruling gods were either cherubim and seraphim. And they would have reflected in their offspring the Ben El, as they're described in the Ugaritic text, the sons of God. They would have looked like their parents. And so when we get a King Karet in the Ugaritic text, he is specifically in the Semitic Benil, son of God, son of El, right? And El is also generic. And who is King Karet? Well, he was the ruler over Crete. Who's the ruler over Crete in the Greek mythology? Zeus. Did Zeus create giants like Hercules? Yes. Who created the Herculean king bloodline? And so KRT is the original Semitic on that for Crete. And King Karet started a royal bloodline, which we would know as that Minoan Empire. And you would also have remnants of those ones showing up biblically, because when the Philistines leave and end up on Crete, they're going to intermarry with different kinds of giants. You're going to have the Pelishim, the
Wow.
Captorim, and the Kerathim.
So when
CH.
they so when they
We
say
get
that,
that as Cherithim as we pronounce it, but it's actually the K sound there.
uh,
Take that back to the original Hebrew, to the original Indo-Aryan, to the original Semitic. It's KRT, and it's
wow,
Karet is the start of that bloodline.
that's awesome. So when they I don't want to lose my place too. So when they say that the 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 Ugarit was like that area was defeated by the seafaring people, I think they say, right? Do they
Yeah.
mean the Minoans or do they mean the Phoenicians and all of them?
Um, Typically you could look at that at both at different times, right? So Phoenicia and Tyre it becomes very, very powerful after the flood. And we don't hear of Ugarit as being a dominant power, but it's kind of part of that northern alliance of giant nations. And
Hmm.
it overlaps with the Hittite
Yeah.
Empire as well, right?
And Hurrians,
And
right?
and the Hurrians are the Horim
Yeah.
in the Bible, and the Hivim, and the Hurrians are could be also the Hurim, which would be a third branch of the same group of giants. So I would say that by the time Tyr comes to its full power, it's absorbed the Ugarit as part of that. But you also have the Sidonian Empire, but they're working together. Sidonian is actually part of the Sidonian Empire. Then the Hittites are a bit further to the north, but they're all dark-haired in color. So they're all intermarrying with more dark-haired giants, and they have a different sort of color of skin than what's in the Covenant land. So you get a dilution of the human um, produced tribes that are intermarrying with these different tribes of giants but are all worshiping the same pantheon. The Hittites have basically a Indo-Aryan produced language and religion, but it's directly associated with the Tyr religion, which is exactly the same as the Ugarit religion. It's the same as the Syrian religion. And they're using in treaties, as we've talked about in other shows, gods like Indra and others from the
Yeah.
Sanskrit version of the same Zoroastrian religion in their treaties.
Yep. Mitra and
Yeah,
all of them. Yeah. The story of King Corette, for people that know, I know Gary. Gary and I both, I think, have this copy of Nicholas
yeah,
Wyatt. This
yeah.
is it's a little pricey if people want to get it out there, but
It's
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 worth it.
worth it.
It's a biblical seminar. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
definitely worth it. And they have the story of King Corette in there.
yeah,
And this is the second edition, the updated edition. It's the
yep,
better one.
yep,
And a lot of what we're going through today, you guys can follow in there with this show afterwards if you guys plan to get it. So it goes right through the story of King Corette and various other stories in there, Gary. What is your have you gone through in the back also they have the the King's List in here
yeah.
somewhere.
Um, no, I haven't dissected all of the King's List, but the original kings are the firstborn uh, of the giants after the flood,
Yeah.
and they all have tribes that are eponymously named after them, which we've kind of shown to a certain degree with the Kerathim or the Cherathim as the Cherethites, as they're shown with the Philistine as part of that grouping. Um, and we also uh, talked about Kadesh and producing a Cadman patriarch that would have produced several different tribes. Um, but there's another god that is called Amur, also known as Amaru and Amar or Amar Am, and it produces names downstream like Amraphel or uh, names like Amarapi in the Ugaritic text, which is Hammurabi. Um, Again, probably some sort of bloodline connection downstream to the Amorite kings of Babylon. And so, how you get there is saying, okay, isn't that interesting? How does Hammurabi get back to the Ugaritic text? Well, biblically, we know King Og ruled over the Amorites after the Rephaim were destroyed in the Genesis 14 war from Mesopotamia coming in. And then the Amorites, after the War of Giants and after the fall of the Third Dynasty, are going to take over Babylon. It's like a revenge war and they get control of the country. And they're also known as the Mark II in Sumeria. So you get Hammurabi as a name that shows up both of Rappi for Raphaim and Amar. Well, it's like the Raphaim of Amar or Amur, and Amr is the original Semitic on that. And so when you see Amur Sin in the Sumerian text, that's the god that it's referring to, which is the son of Anu in that in that pantheon. So Anu is equivalent to El. So what that is telling us, the Amur and Amaru that's in the Ugaritic text is the son of El, and it tells us that El and Anu are the same god. And what type of people, do they produce? Well, we don't get a direct connection back to a tribe of giants, but we get a tribe that's named after Amori, for Amorite, which were also associated with giants. And they were the hybrid giants. So one deduces there was a giant named Amur, and in the Ugaritic text, both Kadesh and Amur are gods, but they also have servants of the same name, which are part of the Tanu, part of the Rapiyam. And so these are now become your patriarch giants to start these other tribes that are going to be named after them. Um, so one deduces there must have been a an original giant tribe of Amorim, but biblically we don't get that. We just get the hybrid version downstream. But the spelling is interesting. So you could get a mix of Amorim giants with Amorite hybrids because the Bible translators aren't very consistent on how they do things. So if you look at the Horim that we get biblically, Horim, they also have Horites. It's the same word, Chori, but they're translating it differently. Now, I think there's a mix of hybrids and giants there. So if you look at the Amorite root word, it's Emoriy in the singular, just as Hori is in the singular. All of those giant tribes have a singular name to them, not a plural name. Rapha for Raphaim, as in the plural. Hori and then Horim as the plural. That's how you get to Amorim or Erit and Eritim as in the plural. For terrible one, terrible ones. Um, and so I would say that would have been two different tribes as well. And then you have like the Amalekim that may be associated with Amor that maybe the Amorites come out of because the Amorites are a blonde-haired variety, like the Anakim and the Amalekim were blonde-haired giants. So it seems likely there's a connection there with the etymology of the names.
Yeah, for sure. There's something I wanted to ask you about too, and maybe we should move on from Mount Saffron because I wanted to ask a question again about that, but but we'll go on. But you mentioned earlier too the cherubim,
Yeah,
and uh, if people aren't familiar of a lot of the Ugaritic findings were in how do you pronounce it? Samra?
Russia,
Ras Samra? The mound,
Russia,
right? That they
yeah,
that's where they found a lot of it. Well, among the I think it was in 14th century BCE,
yeah,
a lot of them, and they have uh, one of the epithets of Baal. I think it's called Rider in the Clouds,
hmm,
and in it they actually refer to Yahweh
yeah,
in one of the Psalms, and it's and Yahweh's he's like addressed in a certain manner where it's very similar to some of the biblical certain biblical things as well. He talks about who makes the clouds your chariot,
yeah,
walks upon the wing of the wind,
yeah,
makes the wind your messenger, the
hmm,
flaming fire your ministers.
yeah,
And also, I wrote down to ask you about this. Isaiah in a vision, an extological vision, he sees Yahweh riding on a swift cloud on his way to Egypt,
yeah,
right? And the cloud is the mount of God is personified as a cherub, right? He rides
yeah,
upon a cherub and he flies. He swoops down on the wings of the wind.
yeah,
And Yahweh's epithet, rider in the clouds, is sort of paralleled by another that's referred to him as the sitter on the cherubim,
hmm,
right? Very interesting parallels they have. So, you
yeah,
know, and there's one where there's an epiphany. Habakkuk, I think.
hmm,
Habakkuk sees Yahweh and he's appearing in this like earth-shaking storm. He's riding on all these horses and chariots, and he's
yeah,
and making Cush and Midian tremble and all of this,
yeah,
right? So it's interesting how they use Yahweh
yeah,
in some of their epithets, right?
Yeah, and not in a monotheist way.
No, no,
Right.
right? So I'm interested in your comments and how you take all of that.
Well, I think, just as you have El in the Canaanite pantheon, the Yah versions would come out of the Canaanite pantheons as well, right?
Wow. Yeah. So yeah. So you would have both sides of the peoples using it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you look at the term for Yahweh, we see that show up as Lord God in the KJV Bible, and that is Jehovah Elohim, Jehovah of the Elohim. So what we understand on that is those are sort of English words to describe different beings, just as you have the Ruach of the Elohim, the Spirit of God in the Hebrew. And biblically, we're going to get that as the Word of God in, the Logos of the Theos in the Greek. So we want to understand that El is also a word for a God or an angel and the supreme high God. And so when we look at the word Yahweh, it's actually got a sort of a root word um, that is I'm trying to think of it. Hava is the root word. Ava or Yava, and that means to be or I am. It means was, and it means became and is. It's those types of state of being. So it's not unusual to see whatever is done in God's realm counterfeited in polytheism. Now, polytheists would say that's the other way around. Fair enough. You have to make your own choice on these things. Now, this chariot of the gods is very common in both polytheism and in some specific passages as we get, as you mentioned, that come down through the Bible. So the most specific one is in Ezekiel 1, 3, and 10, where you have this cherubim pulling the chariot of God. And then you have another type of angel where God sits that looks similar as part of the cherubim, but it's different and it has a different name attached to it because it's within the wheels of the concentric wheels. And what's very interesting about that is that one of the faces of those cherubim-like angels is a cherubim. So it's not a cherubim because it's got a distinction to it.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
but that word is Ophan. The wheels are
The
described
wheels,
as Gilgal, but the wheel beings inside are Ophan.
the
In the
Ophanum.
book, yeah, in the book
Yeah.
of Enoch, they're called the throne angels, the Ophanim. They're part of the four groups of watchers. And so you'll have this understanding of God's chariot that has the cherubim and the Ophanim that are part of the throne. It's like the movable throne is the imagery that's trying to be described here.
People tend to
And
always forget about the Ophanum for some reason.
yeah, well, because they don't trust the book of Enoch, I guess,
Yeah.
but it's a Hebrew word, Ophan. And it's the same word that shows up in the male pluralist. Cherubim would be cherubim as with the plural. So in polytheism, you
You
get
think
uh, you get cherubim, but they're also allegorized as unicorns. And with a special knowledge that they provide that's signified by the horn or the third eye that sort of gets delivered into the physical world. And I know I'm making short work of it because I'm trying to get to a destination. And and so um, this is really important because the original Greek imagery of the chariot of gods is depicted as not a Pegasus horse, but as a unicorn horse pulling Zeus's chariot or Kronos's chariot and other gods' chariots. All of the gods in the pantheon have their own chariot of the gods that became famous through the alien mythos, right? And so what they have, just as they have their council of gods, that's a counterfeit. they have their chariots that they rode on their thrones throughout the world on. And it's the same imagery that God uses. So
Yeah.
we should not be surprised that there's a lot of similarities in the imagery of polytheism and monotheism. And that's why I try to provide information for people, no matter whether you're religious or not, polytheist or monotheist or whatever sect, is you need to understand these details so that you can properly decide what you believe. And it's the same imagery, but everything they do on this earth is
Yeah.
a counterfeit of what is in heaven. And
You
in
think it's
polytheism, they say the same thing. What is on
yeah.
earth will be, or on
Yeah.
heaven will
Yeah,
be
they
on
do.
earth.
Yeah.
So they
You,
tell you what they're doing.
yeah. This is so true. Do you think it's possible they could be referring to the Ophanim in the book of Genesis where they talk about with the cherubim how the flaming sword that
Yeah.
turns every which way to guard the way to the tree of life?
No, I think those are actually cherubim there.
There,
And the reason is cherubim are also great warriors. And so they have the flaming sword there. So I think it's likely properly described there. And cherubim, as they show up in polytheism, in a single face, in a body, physical form, you would see them as a sphinx or with a face of a human or a lion. You'd see them as a cherub in the Middle East with the face of a bull, and then the gargoyle, the face of the eagle. Now, what was the role in polytheism and this really comes back to the Ugaritic text again, as well as plus other ones, is they guarded the sun palaces on the earth, and that's why
yeah,
you have them
on
outside
either
those
side,
temples.
yeah.
And they guarded the portals to the other world. And
The
they
gates
were
to the sun.
warrior, yeah, and
Yeah.
because they were warrior-like. So yeah, I think that would be an accurate depiction of a warrior angel loyal to God guarding Eden.
Yeah, I wonder if it's almost similar to like a Marut of Vedic.
Yeah. Now here's what really gets goofy. So, and you'll know what I'm talking about when we talk about these scorpion gods that also guarded the temples in Sumerian mythology and other ones around the world, also guarded the passages to the underworld. And these are the same beings, and they're called in Sumeria, they are called, I'm not even going to try some of the Central American names. I'll pull a muscle in my tongue. It's so, but
Get a hernia.
yeah, but they are called the Gerdabalu and the mm, Krabamalu in Sumeria. Well, what's interesting is the Hebrew word for scorpion is a crab. And what's interesting is you get these scorpion-like beings coming out of the pit prison in Revelation 9 that cause harm and will, and sting people, and death won't come for 5 months. So now you're going to go, so
Horse tails.
who are these scorpion things that are described as in the same positions as cherubim in polytheism and are in the pit prison? And so Tiamat, in that version of Sumeria, said that she created these scorpion beings to keep the offspring gods in line and to attack them and kill them if that were possible. But yet she still gets killed and they still overthrow her, but they were there as warriors. And so what I think is going on here is when you see the Krabamalu come out of Revelation 9's pit prison, these are degraded cherubim rebellious angels into a scorpion-like creature. And we get an analogy of that because the seraphim are degraded to degraded to satyr gods, goat gods, just as Azazel, which was originally depicted as a seraphim watcher angel in the book of Enoch and elsewhere with serpentine imagery, all of a sudden is now a goat god like Baphomet, Father Mitra, which is the same god as Azazel, the destroyer god. Uh, and all of a sudden now you've got an analogy as to understand some of the workings again of both prehistory and what happens in the end time.
Incredible.
I actually
Incredible.
put a description side by side in book two of cherubim, not of cherubim, as of the Akrabamalu, degraded cherubim, as to what they have in descriptions all around in the world. I think I put about 6 points there, and then the column beside, I put the description of the cherubim, or I mean, of the scorpion beings that come out of the pit prison, and they are identical.
Interesting. It's incredible. Even that story that I mentioned, like with Genesis, with the flame that turns every which way to guard the way
Yeah,
the truth. They
yeah,
have the story. I think it's a Chaldean tablet. I have it. I have it in the
yeah,
translation from the 18. Bell and the Dragon.
yeah,
And right at the beginning, they talk
yeah,
about a flaming sword that turns every which way. To me, it
yeah,
sounds like a coronal mass ejection coming from the sun.
yeah,
It literally
and
sounds like a twisting,
and
turning sword,
yeah, yeah,
coming a solar weapon.
yeah, and Baal the dragon. Why? Because he's an Arrayas god.
Yeah,
If people aren't familiar with that term, that's what they use in the Middle East in ancient times to describe flying serpent gods like Baal,
yeah,
like Osiris, like Anki or Enlil, all seraphim gods.
incredible. And so in the one of the pantheons in Ugarit, they have Yam, Yamm.
Yeah.
Is that similar to Mot, or are they? Because they're both sort of like antagonists of Baal.
Yeah. Yam is more related to Tiamat,
Hmm.
to Leviathan, to all of those Verta, all of those which are slain by,
Typhon.
yeah, a specific god, like
Yeah.
Baal, like Marduk, and like God,
Apophis.
Yeah, like and
Yeah.
like God in the Bible. And this is a common story in all cultures, all religions around the world, just different names of the same ones. Lotan would be another name. Um,
Yeah.
so
It's interesting in Ugarit because like those stories that you're referring to, like Indra and Vitra
yeah,
and Typhon and Zeus and
yeah,
Apophis and
yeah,
well in Ugarit they don't use the male battling the female serpent like
yeah,
Tiamat and Marduk. They have
yeah,
Anath,
yeah,
the female, sort of battling Mot and
yeah,
rescuing Baal.
yeah,
They have
yeah,
it, that I find interesting.
yeah. But Mot's the god of the underworld, so I wouldn't put Yam in the same
Yeah,
category as Mot. And Mot is the brother of Baal.
but he's also you know at war with him,
Yeah,
right?
they never, I didn't say they got along, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, if I
I have
inferred that,
I
I did
have
not mean
brother
to
like that
infer that.
myself.
Yeah. So, but again, it's just how you create the parallels within each of these pantheons that you all of a sudden say they're too close not to be the same pantheon or a recreation of that. But you could easily in each of the seven mountains around the world have the same ruling seven over there, right? As the top seven gods, just using the vernacular names, or they put seven other ones in place there. However you want to get there doesn't really matter, but you have to understand that it's not possible for those similarities to be there that are so closely aligned without being a very intimate relationship, either in the cultures or in the religion, or that they're the same gods.
So they have like in Ugarit, they have like these seven divine women or midwives,
Yeah,
Kotharat.
yeah,
Are you think they would be connected to like those mountains? Sort of like giving birth to new life
yeah.
at these mountains.
Yep,
Yeah.
they could easily be related with that, and and you can sort of look at those seven divine women as producing other gods, or that these are actually human females after the flood, as it's related to Baal and the Baalim Council with these names um, to create giants, and that they're raised to a demigod or godlike status.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And for those that don't know, one of the most popular, sometimes they call him a shippy or a steely, is that ball steely when he's got
Yep,
the thunderbolt.
yep, yeah.
Yeah,
The
and
weapons of the gods,
the
same
weapons of the
weapons
gods.
all
Yeah,
around the
the
all around the
same.
world. Yeah,
Yeah, that's incredible because
yep,
I actually think they are portraying advanced knowledge of the sun
yep.
and solar storms and lightning bolts coming from the sun.
Everything that the gods, parent and offspring, are going to reproduce follow the physical laws of the universe.
Incredible.
So whatever power they're drawing on and whatever technology they're using to access that power comes from the physical world. And so whether or not that's from the sun or other sources, um, hard to know, but they're creating that from what's within the physical universe. So
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so Ball as going into the underworld and then being rescued by Anath, this fierce warrior.
yeah,
Yeah, it's very interesting. And she also employs the sun goddess for it
yep,
as well. So they're saying all these powerful messages here in the context.
they are, and it's important. It's important. I think it's important to understand these stories. Not that I'm trying to convert people to polytheism, because
No, not
w-
at all. Not at
we
all.
get we get at least we get context through it from the polytheist lens about things talked about in the Bible.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to accept that Sheol and Hades is this other world that they're talking about that Mott would be said to be ruling over, right? Or Hades in Greek mythology. They all
Yeah,
have
and
specific gods ruling there.
they're talking about cosmic forces that
Yeah,
didn't just affect our world back in biblical times. They're the same cosmic forces that are hurting our world right now,
yeah.
you know?
And in polytheism, this may, go to what you're were referring to a few minutes ago. In polytheism, you have seven heavens. In monotheism, we're only told there's three heavens. But within the heavens, likely the heavens that are outside the firmament of the first heaven, but it could be in the firmament, but likely outside, you have these other windows that supply things, like hail with fire, like other things. And so you add those windows up, you get to seven. Now, so in the seven heavens, um, and if it's in the physical world, maybe they still rule over that because God's realm is in the spiritual heaven, the third heaven. Um, and the angels rebelled and they took over. I don't know how far that domain goes, but probably within the firmament and maybe even outside the firmament, but not into the spirit realm of where God lives. So they would have had access to these windows in heaven. And we get in the book of Enoch descriptions of these locations as well, of where some of this power comes from. So when you look at
Now we're getting
it,
interesting. Now this is getting
yeah,
interesting. Go
yeah,
ahead. Windows
yeah.
into heaven. Now we're getting interesting here.
And then when you start to look at, you see like the storm god, like Baal in this case, it was had control over the weather. And then you have angels that are in control of the winds. And these are fallen angels who control this at this time. And so they're controlling the forces of the universe. And again, it's how we start to pull into what the Bible is trying to inform us about, to how this world works until the end time. That's why it's important to sort of understand that context, because their heaven, polytheist heaven, is in Sheol or Hades. That's where their kings, their gods rule from. So when they're talking about make sure I get this reference right. When they say as in heaven, as on earth, or
As
as
above,
above,
so
so
below.
below.
Yep.
Yeah, as above, so below. What they're talking about, what happens on the earth above is the same as what happens below. They're not talking about how they would have us believe as in heaven, which would be up from that. It's again, it's an inversion and a counterfeit, but talking about the same sort of things. And so when the Rephaim and giants die, Nephilim giants, they're hoping that they're prepared, that they can find their way into the other world. Why? They want to be with their gods. That's their heaven. That's not for humans because our spirits go back to heaven in a sleep state. Disembodied spirits are counterfeit spirits. They don't sleep and they're not allowed in heaven. They're either going to wander the earth as demon spirits, go to the pit prison as part of the terrible ones, or they find their way to where their gods are to be with them. So again, we can understand the language that runs this world if we want to look at it. And then you start to understand we are absolutely immersed in polytheism. We swim in polytheism everywhere. And we have to recognize that it's the invisible ones who are ruling the earth through their visible ones.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And so, do you think it's possible that these some of these tribes that even migrated to America and the Americas, this North and South America,
Yeah.
set up these windows into heaven at certain mountaintops, even here? Because, like, look at Mount Graham and certain places
Yeah.
where we got these. Not only do we have these lore from the natives that talk about the sky gods, mountain. There's like Mountain Dagon, I think they call them, or
Yeah.
these mountain spirits that protect a doorway from Mount Graham to heaven that they talked about in Native American. But we have all these telescopes from the. Why would the Vatican of all why would the Vatican, a religious
Yeah.
organization, be so concerned about a doorway from the Native Americans?
Yeah.
And they have this advanced telescope there. I think it's even called Lucifer. At one time, they called it Lucifer. I don't know if they still
Yeah.
call it that.
Yeah, they still do. Yeah. And
Wow.
Lucifer, it's named after Venus and their rationalization because
Yeah,
it's
there's another one called the VATT or VAT,
yeah.
the VAT, yeah, something
Yeah.
like that.
So as this religion spreads around the world, it reestablishes with its own geography and language the same things, the same rituals, same kinds of rituals, and mountains become obviously very important again. And before the flood, there may be actually knowledge of where these holy mountains were located that these nations go to, right? And trying to establish those new civilizations. So it's yes, it would be, and you need to understand, or you not need to, but it's good to understand that, these portals to other locations, we have portals to the other world located all around the world, not just at Mount Hermon, all around the world. And anywhere you can have a portal, you can have it. And in the hollow earth, there's ones at the top of the North Pole and the bottom at the South Pole that go into this sort of inner earth. And in the Ugaritic texts, they're going back and forth. Both the giants and the gods go back and forth every day between, not every day, but the gods do every day, and the kings, the Raphaim, the Ugs, they will go through at certain holy days of the year, probably on the wheel cycle, the 8 holy Sabbaths, and also to lead a dead king to the other world because they've been properly prepared. And so they would cross over there. And again, in the Ugaritic text is, from the book that you're talking about, talks about this crossing over to the home of the dead. Hebrew abar for crossing over to the dead. That shows up with the mighty ones in Ezekiel 39. So I think that that's an important aspect to wherever they establish. And even if it's not a mountain, they still have to have portals. And if they don't have a mountain, maybe they create a pyramid to create that sort of thing. And what's also interesting is that at the foot of Mount Hermon, you have Gilgal Raphaim, Wheel of the Giants or Wheel of the Spirits, and it has like 100 dolmens there. And dolmen
Yeah.
is a word for portal.
And the military is involved with a lot of these locations,
Yes.
and they're waiting
Yep.
for something to arrive, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, even on Mount Graham. I mean, why would there be right there? Why would they
Yeah.
be concerned with what? And then if you, I mean, look at the context of the lore associated with that spot. How can that be? I mean,
Yeah.
there's no
There's
coincidences like that.
too
Yeah,
much going on with that. And it has an ancient history and oral tradition too. So
yeah. And if you think it would be the Vatican or something tied to Christianity, and they're waiting for something to arrive from the heavens, that it would be that they were waiting for Christ. But I don't think
yeah.
it's that at all. I don't think
Well,
that's what they're waiting for.
they may have been gone over to the dark side, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but that's a lot of things in the past, has shown that they're continuing a lot of the Ugaritic
Yeah.
practices and some of even the headwear, everything that they do
Yeah.
is straight from these ancient times.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's an all ancient tradition that's passed down. I mean, when you're in an oral tradition coming up,
Yeah,
in prehistory, you have to do things that in ways that people are going to remember. So they create stories um, in an oral tradition that people can remember. And inside that
yeah,
is holding the history. And the clothing is designed to reflect part of the meaning of those stories. And so the worship in rituals is designed at everything is all designed to take you back into history the way it was. You just have to understand the taciturn language that's going on with it.
yeah. It's incredible. Really is incredible. So, what do you think we before we close? There's a few things we should bring up because we could actually probably do a series
Yeah,
on stuff related to the Ugarit. I think it's important that you brought up Mount Saffon too, because that needed to be cleared up for me because in the Bible,
yeah,
if they're talking about Mount Saffon, they're talking about not the Turkey Syria border one, they're talking about Mount Hermon.
yeah.
Okay.
But Saffon doesn't show up in the Bible though. But when it's Sirion, Shinir, Sion, and Hermon, it's all the same mountain. And and the Bible clearly says that those are all Mount Hermon.
Wow. Wow. Because they use the word in Ugaritic a lot in the Ugaritic that Mount Saffon.
Yeah,
It's used a
yeah,
lot. And
yeah.
and in the Bible, I think some people might even confuse it with Zion.
Well, you can with especially when you have Sion, Sion,
Yeah.
and then you have Mount Zion. It's a different Hebrew word that's in Jerusalem. Um, but that also what you should understand is that polytheists conflate the two terms. And so you get, instead of getting the Hebrew translation of Zion in the New Testament, it's Sion, which is the former name for Mount Hermon, not Mount. And you get organized, and that's the French transliteration of Zion, which they use as an excuse, but we have an English language that's translated into, so why would you do that? It's like putting Lucifer in, Italian word from a Hebrew word into the English language, same MO. And you have organizations like the Priory of Sion, that was the senior order to the Knights Templar. And they're not talking in that allegory about Zion. They're talking about Mount Hermon. That's their holy mountain in polytheism that they took over. And and that was once a holy mountain of God in the Garden of Eden. but they control that. And that's where the polytheist holy mountain is today. But God will reclaim that. And so we actually get a little hint of that biblically. We get in First Peter 3, where Jesus is in the grave. He's talking to the spirits in the pit prison. And then I'll just walk people through. And I usually speculate here not to go through the whole story, and I'll shorten this part of it. But what I usually say is he's basically telling them that when he resurrects, your rebellion is over and your fate is going to the lake of fire. So you get a version in Colossians 2:8 where it's talking about the elementals or the rudiments, same Greek word stoichion there, that are working with the fallen angels to rule this world. And this is the group that Jesus makes a spectacle out of. And then when you go to Ephesians 4:8, you get this interesting passage that's describing the captives being led out and paraded out. And as that connects together in a spectacle from the pit prison when Jesus is in the grave. And then you realize Paul is quoting directly out of Psalm 68, where you get the whole story. And he takes them to where? Mount Hermon, and denounces them and pronounces sentences onto
Yeah.
them. And
I always found
yeah,
that amazing.
it's such intricate detailing and
The
importance, and
foothills of
also
Hermon, right?
yeah, to the
Yeah.
foothills of, and that's where Jesus, before he, um, has been crucified. Obviously, he takes the disciples to Mount Hermon, and he makes and establishes his church at the foot of Mount Hermon with his disciples, where the Pan Temple is, where the gateway to Hades is,
Right at his
and he
dome, man.
says, yeah, and he says, not even the gates of Hades will overcome this church.
Wow.
And he's giving them notice, but they just don't know what he's about to do because had they
Wow.
known, they wouldn't have had him crucified, as First Corinthians talks about.
Right at their doorway to the underworld, he
Yeah,
challenges the beast.
yeah, at the Council of the Gods.
Wow. Incredible. That's everybody. If Jesus isn't your savior, you gotta think again about what you're doing, everybody, because he's come back here to point us the coordinates to heaven because we've lost our way. Everybody, the great Gary Wayne, Genesis6conspiracy.com. Gary, do you have anything coming up that you want to share with us? You kind of know
Uh,
he'll be back on December 13th right here on the Space Water Podcast.
yep, no, just that I've just let you know, and I'll we can talk more about it afterwards. But I've for next year, I know we've been wanting to do more shows together. I was looking
Yeah.
at maybe booking out for the year, the second Saturday of every month.
Oh, thank you so much, Gary. That's guys, I cherish to work with Gary and I've been doing this for a decade with Gary and it's helping me find answers that I've been looking for many years as well. And I hope I also contribute from my own research to some of Gary's work
Yep,
as well.
absolutely. Yep.
So, Gary, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having you're one of the only people I interview. I very few other people do I interview, and it's because I appreciate how you do things, and it's a pleasure to learn with you, and I appreciate. I think we're bringing a great fan base together, and it's something that we've getting better and better at as we work together. So I really appreciate you doing that for me, Gary. Thank
It's
you. I appreciate it, guys.
always fun with the topics that you choose because it gets to things that, other people haven't got to. Um,
Thank you.
and it would be nice to see some of it sort of go viral because to me, some of the information is just so
Yeah.
meaningful to understand how things were and how things are and where things are going that,
I think it's only a matter of time. Even
yeah.
in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be interviewed on Dr. Michael Sala.
Yeah.
show. So maybe we'll get even more attention
Sure.
from
Yep.
me going on shows like that. And you know, we're getting a pretty. I mean, I've gotten some of our shows have gotten like maybe 9, 10,000
Yeah.
views, things like that. But it deserves so much more attention because we the two of us together we bring a rare combination that you really can't find anywhere else.
Well, and we can back it up with sources.
Yep, exactly,
And
exactly.
that's the difference between talking head speculating to here's where you get that information if you want it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, because I'm a little younger, I'm 47
Yeah.
and I probably look a lot younger than that and I probably look like I'm gonna go buy the new Eminem
Yeah.
album, but I've
Yeah.
been doing 30
Yeah.
years of research or
Yeah.
more in this as
Yeah.
well. So, yeah, we can back it up. We can back it up.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate people challenging things, you know, because helps me learn as well. I mean, you push me
Yeah.
to, you know, and it gets us to prove the depth of what we know it, but and what we don't know.
Yeah.
You know, thank you everybody. The
Uh,
great
and I'll
Gary Wayne.
and I'll leave everybody with this with the term Ugarit, which we already talked about. Ug and terrible, and you get the terrible one with putting the I am a male plural on it. You would understand that from a Hebrew perspective is Kiriam Ugarit, and that would mean the city of Og the terrible one. Just as you
Wow.
have Kiriath Arba, the city of Arba, the patriarch of the Anakim, which was named later
Wow.
named Hebron.
Even, so Ugra is almost a combination of Arba and Ug. That's
Yeah.
oh my God.
Well, and Arba means four, so um, you wonder which one would have been named one or associated as the first one. Was it King
Yeah.
Og? Was it Rafa? We don't know, but
And I too I wanted to point out to people I forgot to mention before. A lot of times when you see the cow references or bull references, it means rays of light. I mean in Sanskrit they have a word
yeah,
Go.
yeah,
And a lot of times it's used, it means cows, but the
sure.
cows mean rays of light.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So incredible, incredible, everybody. So the one and only, not Bruce Wayne, Gary Wayne, everybody. The from Genesis 6 conspiracy.com. Welcome everybody to the show today. I really appreciate you guys coming in the chat room. We'll see you guys on December 13th back with Gary Wayne. Thank you for joining us and Spiral out.